Hey. So, what I want to talk with you here today is how to actually drive predictable revenue and profit in your business and get off the revenue roller coaster using a closed loop system. So, before I get into what our closed loop system looks like, I want to explain to you what it means to have an open loop system right now and why this is causing so much grief and why I see so many people have a love hate relationship with their marketing because it's not producing the results they want. Now, on a scientific level, we think of an open loop system, it's much like a toaster. It means that we put in and then we get something out. So, in the example of a toaster, you may be putting in a piece of bread, turning the dial to the level of toastedness that you want from it, which is really just us adjusting the dial to the number of minutes it's being toasted for. And as a result, getting out the output that we want. And what happens with a toaster, if you've ever had a new toaster, is when you're putting in the piece of bread, you have to decide and figure out how many minutes you want that to be toasted for it to be the optimal level of toastiness that the bread comes out with. Now, maybe you've narrowed this down. You've gotten it down to a science. You know how to create the perfect piece of toast that is like exactly what you want every single time. But what happens when we shift and we change and we add a piece of whole wheat toast instead of our sourdough toast, or we put a bagel in instead of that? And what happens when we change the variable of what we're putting in? Now we have to readjust the knobs, test and trial until we figure out how to get the perfect piece of toasted bagel or perfect piece of toasted whole wheat bread instead. The problem becomes most marketing has not learned how to adjust based on different variables. And if we recognize the fact that we're not toasting bread in our business. We're selling to human beings who are constantly evolving and shifting. And that requires us to understand how to alleviate that. The problem with an open loop system is we're going to constantly having to check and adjust the dial in order for it to work, which means we're constantly reinventing the wheel and it can be frustrating in our marketing. Why is it that the webinar we created last year stops working this year and the content we're posting yesterday stops working today? There's too many variables. And especially when we're working with humans, we realize that variables and algorithms, all those things are constantly shifting. So, how do we combat this idea of an open loop system that only works when all variables remain the same? Well, right now, I want you to first look at what may be happening within your business and your marketing and sales process. Right now, you're using all these different pieces of the puzzle. You're posting, you're doing a sale, you're having a webinar, you're sending messages, you're going live, you're creating all the variables that are supposed to create the right output. Now, the problem isn't that you don't have enough variables. The problem isn't that you don't have enough of the pieces, meaning you're not going live enough or you're not posting enough. It's that the variables aren't able to create a closed loop that actually moves as things shift through. Now, as a result, you feel a little bit like you're shouting into the abyss and constantly restarting and reevaluating and trying to fix the problem as it comes up. Now, the problem is this is probably what you've been taught when it comes to sales and marketing, looking at it as a very linear approach that is just one thing leads to the next and etc. But again, as we mentioned, people are evolving, people are changing. The way we do business consistently shifts, but we don't want to constantly having to be changing and chasing after those as we go through it. And so, a typical funnel that we see something like this in an evergreen function operates in a way where we're essentially giving them something and pushing them through the process. And if somebody doesn't buy by the end of that, we're doing one of two things. We're either remarketing to them using the same information over and over again, or we are essentially churning through those leads and saying this was not a viable option and telling ourselves that the problem was that we didn't have the right leads or that we need more leads within our business. But the definition of what's known as Einstein's insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. Yeah, here we are marketing over and over again, doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So, what I want to share with you here today is more of what we call a closed loop system. So, a great example of a closed loop system in real life is your air conditioner. You go to turn it on and you adjust the temperature to 70 degrees. And what ends up happening is that the air conditioner can turn on and off based on what it's sensing within the room. This is an example of a closed loop system. It's adjusting specifically based on what it's finding happening in that moment in that room. That's exactly what we want to be able to replicate when it comes to our marketing and sales process, and recognizing that a closed loop system allows things to move and shift based on what's happening around it. So I want to share with you an example of how we use a closed loop system. We use what we call our infinite sales highway, which essentially has our leads coming through our bingeable sales system. Now, knowing that not everyone's going to buy immediately, and instead of just constantly remarketing to them or churning through those leads, what we recognize is that those people who are ready, which we call our high intent leads, will move down into the pathway and make that decision. We're optimizing our entire process, not for the consumption of sharing more information in an attempt to try to get people to make a decision, but instead of understanding and optimizing for the right information that actually closes the loop and allows people to make decisions. So in this case, if someone goes through our bingeable sales system and decides not to make a purchase immediately and move to that next step, instead, we understand that there's a moving dynamic between the desires people have, and that the reason people aren't purchasing isn't because they need more of the same information, it's because they weren't given what they need in order to make that decision. So what our one touch content system does is approaches how we support people in that decision making process in a way that's tangible and supports them in a very individualized approach. So we take different demand angles, different reasons and triggers of why people buy. The best example that I use is that the reason I buy Nike shoes might be because I think it's going to make me run faster, but the reason that my daughter loves Nike shoes is because she actually thinks it's a status symbol and all her friends will think she's cool. Now, I need to be able to understand and recognize the different trigger points that people experience that are consistently shifting. But rather than constantly restart and rebuild my entire marketing and sales system, what I'm able to do is identify those different trigger points and then create a decision system throughout my weekly nurture process. So in our case, we use a content system that literally just uses 3 to 4 pieces of content to drive a decision, still creating a closed looped process that is very similar to what you experience when going through a funnel. So rather than arbitrarily putting out marketing content after somebody hasn't purchased and expecting them to buy based on the same shared information, or again, churning through them, what we're doing is specifically and strategically and methodically understanding and recognizing the shifting behaviors and trigger points of why someone makes a purchase in the first place, and then literally being able to speak to those individualized needs through a decision making process through those 3 to 4 pieces of content. So every piece of the marketing and sales funnel is a closed loop that feeds into each other to create the ultimate decision, which is saying, yes, I'm in. This is the answer to what it means to create an individualized approach to serving our clients as if we're one to one having one to one conversations, but doing so at scale in an automated approach. So imagine your business no longer needing to churn through large numbers of leads, no longer needing to have setters or other people in your business to try and maintain those one to one conversations that work so well, but instead being able to have a marketing system that picks up where your sales system left off to support in creating those closed loops and decisions where your prospective client feels like you're speaking to just them. This is the difference in being able to create infinite sales within your business, which allows your prospective client to make decisions with ease, knowing exactly which door to walk through because you've painted the perfect picture and taken them along that pathway through a closed loop system. The results, having the peace of mind to know that your systems are working for you, that you're not constantly having to restart or reevaluate or change everything as each desire shifts, as the market shifts, as algorithm shifts. You've built the client acquisition systems that learn to adapt and adjust as people grow and shift and evolve within that market. So if you want to learn how we leverage this closed loop system that we call the infinite sales highway, I want to invite you to the next step where we'll talk about what this can look like within your business. On this growth optimizer call, you and I will sit down, we'll evaluate what your current system looks like, and I'll show you exactly how this can be applied within your business and how I can help you using the Easy Yes method. Now, I want you to walk away from this asking yourself, what happens if 30 days from now you do the same thing? You're still marketing in the same way, you're still bringing in the same type of leads, you still feel like you're chasing and trying to constantly fill that hole of what's going wrong and needing a new funnel every time a new offer comes out. What if instead you had one system that grew with your business, learned how to completely optimize for each individual person's desires, and allowed you to systematically move people through that process without you needing to do all of the heavy lifting? What would change in your life if you were able to achieve that? I want to evaluate that directly with you on our growth optimization call. So head on over to easyesleads.com/call or click the link below this video to book your call.